you need a level of knowledge that is good enough to understand IELTS reading texts. You need to understand key IELTS issues. So a lot of the reading texts you see on IELTS tests are about current affairs issues you see in the news. Be able to recognize text structures. So we'll look at different text structures today. How to answer different types of questions. So there are about 8 different question types on the IELTS reading test. Find information quickly. Ignore unknown words. So when you look at a reading text, there will always be some words that you don't understand. But in my experience, nearly always these words are not important in trying to find the answer for the question. So don't waste time trying to understand specific words in the text. Guess words from context. So sometimes a sentence might be written in a way that you're not quite familiar with. Therefore, you need to guess the understanding of that sentence. And finally, make intelligent guesses about the answer. So sometimes two possible answers to a question are very similar. So you might need to eliminate one by making what we would call an intelligent guess. So some students find IELTS reading the most difficult part of the exam. Well, actually, in my own experience, I do actually find reading the most difficult of the 4 IELTS tests. There are 3 texts to read and 40 questions to answer in 60 minutes. So that's about 20 minutes per text. The language in the text is academic, can be quite formal. Some of them are very technical and scientific, and at times they can be complex. And many students do not read this kind of text in their everyday life or studies. The format of some of the questions can be tricky, and they require detailed understanding. So what we call skimming and scanning skills will help you find where the answer is, but not what the answer actually is. You need a very good knowledge of vocabulary and an ability to follow complex language in a very time limit and under pressure. So IELTS reading is a timed test. And finally, improving your reading takes time and effort. I've met very few students who are natural IELTS readers. Most students have to practice a lot. So that's the bad news. Let's look at the good news. IELTS texts follow a predictable structure. For example, chronological, that means in order of time, or theoretical, based on research and evidence. Once you recognize the structure, you will know where to find the answers more quickly. IELTS texts relate to similar subjects, so you can easily build up your vocabulary and knowledge to help you understand concepts more easily. So one thing I say to my students that if you do find unfamiliar vocabulary when doing an IELTS reading, then make a note of it, and as part of your homework, go to a dictionary and find the meaning. IELTS questions also follow a similar format. Again, once you know how the questions work, For example, true, false, not given, you will identify the correct answer more confidently. And IELTS questions always go in the same order as the answers are found in the text. The exception to this is matching heading statements with paragraphs, which is in the second part of the test. This means that you don't need to jump around the whole text to find the answer. And reading is just like any other skill. The more you practice, the better you get and the easier it becomes. So what can I do to improve my reading? So as we discussed above, it's so important to have a good background knowledge and vocabulary to help you with the typical topics that come up in the IELTS academic reading. If you are aware of some of the concepts that you will read about, this will save you so much time in the exam. And reading test articles are often taken from journals, such as The Scientist, National Geographical, and The Economist. I'm not sure about The Scientist and The Economist, but National Geographical, it's quite easy to get hold of articles from there on the internet. Let's have a look at some true, false, not given questions. So, if you struggle with true, false, not given, then follow some basic rules to help you understand the way these questions work. So, true means the statement is true as the text. You have to find synonyms that say the same thing as the statements. False, the statement contradicts or says the opposite of the text. And in these examples, you have to find evidence that the statement is wrong or not true. And not given, the text does not say if the statement is true or false. So in real life, it could be true or false, but there is no answer in the text. So don't assume that the answer is true or false. If there's nothing in the text to confirm that, then it's not given. So remember, the answer is always in the text. You never need to use your own general knowledge, though sometimes it might help you guess the answer before you find it in the text. This one's important. There is always at least one true, one false, and one not given answer. So true, false, not given tend to be in a group of 5 questions, and at least one of them will, one answer will be of each type. The statements are always in the same order as they appear in the text. If you find the right part of the text, but you can't find the answer, then the answer is probably not given. And true, false, not given are not the same as yes, no, does or does not say type questions. So let's look at a strategy. Make sure you understand the statement. Use keywords in the statement, for example, capital letters, names, or dates, to quickly find the part of the text you need. Look for synonyms. Synonyms are really important. So synonyms of the statement to find true answers. Look for antonyms. So antonyms is the opposite from the statement to find false answers. And turn the statement into a question. This will help you see if the answer is actually not given in the text. And true, false, not given on the answer sheet. Write true, not false, not, or T, F, and G on the answer sheet to save time. You don't need to write true or false or not given in full. And again, do not get confused with yes, no, not given. I occasionally get students who, instead of writing true or false or T or F, they write yes or no. And in those cases, your answers will be automatically marked wrong because you are not answering the question as instructed. So let's look at a little example. So this one is true. So read this paragraph from a text about how the pyramids were built. So the pyramids of Egypt were built more than 3,000 years ago, and no one knows how. The conventional picture is that tens of thousands of slaves dragged stones on sledges, but there is no evidence to back this up. Now look at statement 1. It is generally believed that a large number of people will need to build the pyramids. So underline the synonyms or similar words or words with the same meaning. So synonyms, you could have it is generally believed. So the conventional picture, see how I've highlighted that in the paragraph. Large numbers of people, so tens of thousands of slaves. Again, I've highlighted that in the paragraph. So is this statement true or false? And of course, the correct answer is true. The statement has exactly the same meaning as the text. Let's have a look at the opposite, so false. So follow the same strategy for the next question. So here's the paragraph. Now a Californian software consultant called Maureen Clemens has suggested that kites might have been involved. While perusing a book on the monuments of Egypt, she noticed a hieroglyph that showed a row of men standing in odd postures. So look at statement 2. So Clemens found a strange hieroglyph on the wall of an Egyptian monument. So is statement 2 true or false? So the sentence in the text contradicts or says the opposite of statement 2. So what the text actually says is, while perusing a book, is not the same as on the wall of an Egyptian monument. So, of course, the answer is false. So, one little tip I give to students, if you want to check if the answer is not given, turn the statement into a question. So, did Clemens find the hieroglyph on the wall of an Egyptian monument? And where did Clemens find the hieroglyph? Was it on the wall of an Egyptian monument? And the answer is in the text. She found the hieroglyph in a book. So the answer is given, but the statement is not correct. So this is false. Let's look at a not given examples. Look at the next paragraph of the text. And remember that the statement questions will go in the same order as the information in the text. So let's look at the text. Intrigued, Clemens contacted Morteza Jarib aeronautics professor at the California Institute of Technology. He was fascinated by the idea. Coming from Iran, I'd been interested in Middle Eastern science, he says. He too was puzzled by the picture that had sparked Clement's interest. So, statement number 3. Garib had previously done experiments on bird flight. So ask yourself the question, did Garib do experiments on bird flight before he met Clements? And the answer is maybe he did, maybe he didn't. We don't know. So the answer is not given. So to conclude, not given is very different from false. False answers say the opposite or give incorrect information. So you need to read very carefully to see if you can find any evidence of opposite or incorrect information. And not given answers do not have the opposite information. They may say something related to the topic, but it will not give us an answer to the question in the statement. Let's have a look at some gap summaries. So these are often one of the easiest parts of the reading. The summary usually focuses on just 1 or 2 paragraphs, so you don't need to look through the whole text. The summary usually has a heading, which helps you to find the paragraphs with the answers. The gaps are words taken from the test. So even if you don't know what all the words mean, you can find them. And the gaps are usually in the same order as they appear in the original text. The sentences surrounding the gaps use synonyms to summarize the paragraph. And these synonyms will lead you to the right answer. Now, here are 8 useful tips and strategies. So, number 1, use the text title to work out the structure of the whole reading. So, for example, what destroyed the civilization of Easter Island? This title of the text tells us what to expect. And in this text, we have different theories from different specialists. Number 2, use the summary heading to find the right paragraph. So the heading of the gap summaries gives us one answer to the title's question. It tells us Jared Diamond's view. And use the capital letters in the name Jared Diamond to quickly find the paragraph which was Diamond's views. And 3, use synonyms. So look around the gap for synonyms to help you find the sentences which contain the answer, and read the gap text below and compare it with the original text underneath. So this is the gap text. So this is where you have to complete all the gaps. And what I've done, I've underlined some keywords and phrases which might or might not help me find the answers. So clearly we need to focus on what Diamond believes. And for number 21, we need to focus on the cutting down of trees for fuel and the clearing of land. So basically, why are they clearing land? And here is the actual text. So you see the first thing I've highlighted is Diamond believes. And the next one I've highlighted in brown is the islanders clear the forests for firewood and farming. And then for the other gaps, I've also highlighted other important phrases in the text. So I'm not going to read it all, but I'll just give you a few seconds to study the text. So I've also highlighted they could no longer construct wooden canoes for fishing. They ate birds. And then in section C, I've underlined power displays and rifle chieftains. And then highlighted something that Diamond thinks. So, when answering this, you need to decide what type of word you need. Do you need a verb, a noun, an adjective, or a number? Use your general knowledge to make quick, educated guesses. Make sure you always keep the S on plural forms. So countable, uncountable nouns is a frequent error in IELTS reading. Copy the words exactly as they appear in the text. And the words usually come in the same order as they appear in the text, so don't waste time looking for answers in different places. So let's go back to the gap tests that has to be completed. And let's go through the answers one by one. So Diamond believes that the Polynesian settlers at Rapa Nui destroyed its forests, cutting down the trees for fuel and clearing land for farming. So the answer is the islanders cleared the forest for firewood and farming. The next answer, when the islanders were no longer able to build the canoes, they needed to go fishing. So they could no longer construct wooden canoes for fishing, is the answer. And 23, they began using the island's birds as a food source. So the answer is they ate birds. And for number 24, the methods of transporting the statues needed not only a great number of people, but also a great deal of wood. So the answer to the gap is wood. And if we just look back, and you see, so 21 for farming, 22 canoes, 23 birds, and 24 wood. And as I mentioned before, use of synonyms is important. And there are the synonyms from the text. Let's have a look at a matching statement example. So to match statements with the names of the experts, researchers in the text, you need to develop the reading skills of scanning to find the relevant names, understanding expressions of opinion, so reporting verbs like claims, argues, believes, and so on, recognizing synonyms and guessing vocabulary from context. So this word guessing appears again. And there's no doubt that some answers you will have to guess. So for matching statements, let's look at the strategies to help you match them. So use the capital letters of the people's names to help you find them quickly. Circle the names of people you have to match. Ignore any other names that appear. The names of people do not appear in the same order as the statements. And remember that you can use any of the names more than once. So let's have a look at what you have to do. Here's a very simple example. So, who? So we have to match the statements to the three people called Galton, Bouchard, and Reed. And we have 5 statements to match to the person. So for number 1, who invented a term used to distinguish 2 factors affecting human characteristics? Who expressed a view that the study of epigenetics will increase our knowledge? Who developed a mathematical method of measuring genetic influences? Who pioneered research into genetics using twins? And finally, who carried out research into twins who had lived apart? So what did Gatton do? Gatton first suggested the approach and coined the phrase nature and nurture. Bouchard used this mountain of data to identify how far twins were affected by their genetic makeup. The key to their approach was a statistical concept called heritability. Bouchard's lab became known as the Minnesota study of twins reared apart. And for C, Reed adds that the latest work in epigenetics promises to take our understanding even further. So let's try and match the statements. So the answers are, number 1 is A, 2 is C, 3B, 4A, and 5B. And the answers are in the synonyms of the way the person's idea is paraphrased in the statements. So it was Galton who invented a term or coined a phrase, which is an idiomatic expression, to distinguish 2 factors affecting human characteristics. So nature and nurture is the phrase. Reed expressed the view that the study of epigenetics, so that latest work in epigenetics, will increase our knowledge, so promises to take our understanding further. And Bouchard developed a mathematical method, so he used this mountain of data of measuring genetic influences to identify how far twins were affected by their genetic makeup. And Galton pioneered or first suggested the approach. So Bouchard carried out research into twins who had lived apart. So it was called the study of twins reared apart. Right, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do some reading activities of the main question types on the reading test. And wherever possible, I've got both the text and the statements or questions on the same slide to make it easier. So firstly, read the text below about Isaac Newton. So he was an English physicist, mathematician and astronomer, natural philosopher, alchemist and theologian. his philosophy, Naturalis Principia Mathematica. So that's Latin for mathematical principles of natural philosophy, usually called the Principia, published in 1687, is one of the most important scientific books ever written. So it lays the groundwork for most of classical mechanics. Newton is considered by many scholars and members of the general public to be one of the most influential people in human history. French mathematician Joseph Louis Lagrange often said that Newton was the greatest genius who ever lived. Newton himself had been rather more modest of his own achievements, famously writing in a letter to Robert Hooke in February 1676, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." So, from these two paragraphs, we have three statements to answer. So, are the following statements true, false, or not given? So, Newton's Principia is recognized as a groundbreaking text in its field. So, the key word here is groundbreaking. Many experts regard Newton as the greatest genius the world has ever seen. So here we need to highlight many experts and as the greatest genius. And finally, Newton wrote he had achieved everything without the help of others. So here we need to underline achieved everything. So, what is the answer? Let's look. So the correct answer is number 1. And if we go back, so the key word in the statement is groundbreaking. And if we look at the text, we will see that in the final sentence of the first paragraph, it lays the groundwork for most of classical mechanics. Let's have a look at another one, true, false, not given. So look at the following extract from a text about a psychology experiment. So I'll let you read that paragraph and then we'll go through the statements. So, are the following statements true, false, or not given? So the participants in the study were all psychology students. Well, if you look at the text, if you look at the third line, it says in which 21 normal college students were randomly assigned. So, for this one, it's false. They were not all psychology students. They were given the choice of playing the role of prisoner or guard. Well, in the same sentence, it says they were randomly assigned to be prisoners or guards. So again, the answer is false. A real prison was used in the experiment. Well, if you look at line 4, it says a mock prison located in the basement of the psychology building at Stanford. And finally, the study aimed to investigate the mental and behavioural effects of life in prison. And if we look at the final sentence, the 2-week plan study into the psychological impact of prison life. So the psychological impact of prison life is a synonym of investigate the mental and behavioural effects. So statement 4 is true. Here we have 2 paragraphs about a chess-playing computer. So again, I'll give you a short while to read that. And then we'll look at the questions. Let's have a look at the instructions. So choose the best headings for paragraph A and B from the list below. So would the best heading be the first chess-playing computer? Would it be developer's intervention is questioned? Would it be chess champion accepts defeat? Would it be program developers caught cheating? Or would it be a victory for artificial intelligence? So which 2 of those are the best headings for paragraph A and B? So let's quickly go back to the paragraphs. So if we look at the last sentence of paragraph A, it ends with becoming the first computer system to defeat a reigning world champion. And if we look in paragraph B on the 3rd line, Kasparov, well, on the 2nd line, he suggested that during the 2nd game, human chess players would intervene on behalf of the machine. So if we go back to the headings, So a victory for artificial intelligence looks to be the answer for the first paragraph. And the second one, developers' interventionist question, seems to be appropriate for the others. So let's check the answers. So the correct answers are 2 and 5. Now, one way something you can do with your reading is to prove why the answers are correct. In other words, you're going to do things the opposite way around. So look at the true, false, not given statements and correct answers below. Can you explain why each answer is correct? So Watson measured both visible behavior and hidden emotions. So that is false. And Skinner's approach differed from that of Watson and Pavlov in that he went beyond the strictly observable. And that is true. So if we look at the text, so the explanations, by only measuring observable behaviors and events, and also their potential effect. So here's the reading. And if we look at the end of the first paragraph, by only measuring observable behaviors and events. And if we look at the second paragraph, their potential effect on the antecedents of behavior. So Watson did not measure both visible behavior and hidden emotions. But Skinner did have a different approach. And those are the two expressions to confirm that. Here we have another example from section 2 of the reading test. So where you have to choose the best title from a list. So in this case, we have 2 paragraphs and we have 4 possibilities. So should they be called, any of them, a shocking vision of the future? Should it be, what is future shock? Should it be the career of the futurist Alvin Toffler? Or should it be titled A Changing Society? So I'll leave that on the screen for a minute for you to match. And does anybody want to tell me on the group chat which is the correct answer? Is it number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4? And the correct answer is number 4, or D, which is a changing society. Let's have a look at one more. Okay, multiple choice exercise. The placebo effect. So read the text and choose the best answer to the questions below. It should be choose, not chose. So we have 2 short statements about the placebo effect. And then we need to choose A, B, or C as the answers. And in this case, the correct answer for number 1 is B. So an improvement in a patient's health as a result of simulated medical treatment. And if we look at the text, it says a perceived or actual, it says A is a sham or simulated medical intervention. And the correct answer for number 2 is C, for fatigue patients or those suffering from viruses. And if we look at the second sentence, that confirms the answer. So placebos were antibiotics for viral infections and vitamins for fatigue. Let's have a look at another text. And this is also multiple choice. So just read the text first, and then I'll show you what answers need to be chosen. Here are the choices, which 2 of the statements are correct. So the creator of the Nobel Peace Prize was himself a producer of weapons. The Nobel Peace Prize is a controversial award. Nobel was a peace activist during his lifetime. The Peace Prize category was suggested by one of Nobel's friends, and Nobel saw the destructive application of some of his inventions. So for A, you would need to focus on producer of weapons. For B, controversial award. For C, peace activists. For D, prize suggested by one of his friends. And for E, he saw the destructive application and inventions. So if we go back to the text, So if we look at the end of the text, it says his inventions included dynamite and ballistite, both of which were used violently during his lifetime. So that one is E in the multiple choice. And if we look at the beginning, he is a Swedish industrialist, inventor and armaments manufacturer. Armaments being a synonym of weapons. So we should find that the correct answers are A and E. Let's look at a gap fill example. So here we have to fill in these gaps. So people are encouraged to park. Only vehicles permitted are those used for. And something about types of road surface. So let's look at the text. And if we go back to the gap fills, so are encouraged to park, something town, city. So here we have often accompanied by car parks on the edge. So that seems to fit. For the next one, the only vehicles. So which vehicles are permitted? So here it says, near the end of the first paragraph, most of these zones allow delivery trucks to service the businesses located in the early morning and street cleaning vehicles at night. So it could be delivery and street cleaning, and road surface must be in the second paragraph. So here we have surfaced with cobblestones and pavement bricks. Which discourage any kind of wheeled traffic. So if we go back to certain types of road surface can be used, so it could be discouraged. So if we look at the answers, the first one is on the edge, next delivery in street, and finally discourage. So on the edge of town, delivery, vehicles used for delivery and street cleaning, and finally used to discourage traffic. Here we have another one, fill in the gaps. And what are the questions? So these are the questions. So clearly for the first one, it's going to be some type of animal. For the second one, something they do at night. Then we have something about their hearing and smell, and something about their eyesight. Without having to, so it could well be a verb as the answer for the last one. And we have to match one of these words to fill in the gap. So the first one is going to be a noun, and we do have a noun here, which is diurnal, animals. Now, what can they do at night? Well, at night time, most people will go to bed. Well, asleep does not fit, but asleep does fit. So it's going to be sleep. Animals at night tend to have, so something about their hearing and smell. So is it going to be something good about it? So we have exceptional. There's a possibility. And we also have an adjective sensitive. So it could be that it's sensitive hearing and smell, and they may have exceptional eyesight. And then we're looking for a verb to finish. So we have two verbs. We have conflict and compete. So I would say that compete is probably the best verb here to fit with the answer. So to finish, those are the answers. So to finish today, I've got 12 reading tips for you. So firstly, how should I practice? So this is a question I get asked several times. Many students complain they don't get a high enough score in IELTS reading. And many teachers' response that you need more practice. Could you describe how to practice for reading correctly? I do practice with the Cambridge books and spend time reading newspapers, but with no results. So here's my answer. So firstly, testing yourself is not the best form of practice. You should test yourself from time to time, for example, once a week, but spend much more time studying rather than testing. Studying means that your aim is to learn something from what you read. For example, when reading newspaper articles, you might learn a new word or phrase, or you might learn how to use a word correctly in a new context. Don't forget to check things in a dictionary or by searching online and writing new language in a notebook. So the Cambridge IELTS books are great resources for studying as well as testing. Try doing some reading tests without a time limit. Allow yourself to use the dictionary to check words and aim to get all of the answers right. Analyze your mistakes carefully and make keyword tables. We'll look at keywords in a minute. Above all, remember that IELTS reading is a vocabulary test. Answer yourself what new vocabulary you have learned this week. And can you point to a page of your notebook and say, I've learned these 10 or 20 new words and phrases this week. If you can, you are improving. The time problem. So IELTS reading is a time task, and not having enough time is a big problem for many students. So here are my tips. Firstly, go straight to the first question. Don't waste time reading the full passage or the first sentence for each paragraph, and don't read any of the other questions. Just focus on the first question. Do paragraph questions last. Questions that ask you to match headings or statements with paragraphs are much easier if you are already familiar with the passage. Don't get stuck on one question. So as soon as you realize you are having difficulties with a question, leave it and move to the next one, and return to difficult questions later. Remember that the answers to most question sections are in order in the passage. You don't need to go back to the beginning of the passage to search for each answer. So only skim or scan for numbers and names, otherwise read at normal speed. And finally, work with an alarm. You can't do this in an exam, but at home you can set the alarm on your phone for 2 minutes and try to do each question. So try and answer each question within 2 minutes. Note, when preparing for the reading test at home, try not to worry about time at first. Your first concern should be to get the score you need, even if it takes you 3 hours instead of 1 hour to do a full test. Next, number 3, read better, not faster. So many students worry that they read too slowly, and they ask me for advice about reading faster. These students are surprised when I tell them that it might be better to slow down and read better rather than faster. If you read too quickly, or if you find the answers by skimming and scanning, you probably won't fully understand what you're reading, and you might miss the answers that you're searching for. On the other hand, if you read at normal speed, you're more likely to understand what you're reading, and you'll have plenty of time to find the answers. So if you struggle to finish all 40 questions in 1 hour, it's probably because you didn't understand the passage well enough, not because you didn't read it fast enough. So you need to analyze your mistakes and look up the words and phrases that you didn't understand. In other words, work on becoming a better reader, not a faster reader. Number 4, the real secret to improving your reading is not a special trick method or exam technique. It's simpler than that. If you want to improve your reading, you need to read more. Read things that truly fascinate you. Read about your hobbies, people you admire, gossip, or whatever you would choose to read for fun in your own language. Do some reading that isn't a form of study. It doesn't matter if you don't understand every word. Just expose your brain to lots of interesting English, and you'll learn even without even realizing it. Of course, you need to keep doing your IELTS reading practice too. And there are reading techniques that can help you. Just add some fun reading to your schedule and see what happens. A different way to practice. So you could choose a passage from one of the reading texts, get the correct answers from the back of the book. Now read the first question, underline keywords and search for the answer in the passage. You already know the correct answers, so your only aim is to find it where it is in the passage. Underline words in the passage that are the same meaning as the keywords in the question. And when you have done this for each question, make a keyword table, so like a list of keywords. This technique forces you to stop testing yourself. Instead, it makes you focus on finding key vocabulary and understanding the word reason for each answer. You might be surprised at the improvements you make if you regularly practice in this way. Next, why isn't my score improving? So the student asked me the other day to explain why his reading score was stuck at band 5.5. And this is what I wrote in response. So the first step towards making an improvement is to understand what you're doing wrong. So you need to analyze what's happening when you do reading activities and tests. So here are some questions that you could ask yourself. Do you finish all 40 questions? Do you find one type of question very difficult? Are you reading too slowly or maybe too quickly? Are you following all of the advice I've given in my lessons? Are you doing realistic practice tests using the Cambridge books? What scores do you get when you practice tests? What problems do you notice when you do practice tests? And try to work out what is going wrong. Then I'll be able to give you better advice. And I tend to find that most students, they will find one type of question more difficult than the rest. And if that is the case, it's that question type or question types that you need to focus on. Don't focus on the question types that you find a lot easier to do. Another one, people who read too quickly in the IELTS test often miss the answers. If you go too fast, you won't really understand what you're reading and you'll start to panic when you don't find what you're looking for. However, some people read too slowly. They read each word as if it was a separate item on the page. These people tend not to finish the test. So instead of skimming too quickly or reading each word slowly, I recommend that you read phrase by phrase. For example, read the sentence below as 3 phrases. So people who read too quickly in the IELTS test often miss the answers. And try to get into the habit of reading phrase by phrase. You should find that you can go to reasonable speed and you'll understand almost everything. And actually in speaking form, speaking phrase by phrase is what is known as chunking, and it's quite a natural thing to do in English. When are the answers in order? So for the following question types, the answers usually, almost always, are in order in the passage. And that lists all the question types that applies to this. Two questions about exam technique. So should you read the whole passage before looking at the questions? And should you go to the questions first, then skim and scan to find the answers? So my answer to question 1 is no. You don't have time to read the whole passage unless your English is almost native speaker level. And my answer to question 2 is yes and no. Yes, go to the questions first. No, don't skim or scan unless the question contains a name or number. My advice is to do the questions one by one. Instead of skimming or scanning, read the passage carefully. The answers to most question sections will be in order in the passage. So you will gradually read the whole passage as you find the answers. Paragraph headings. So here are my top 4 tips to how to answer paragraph headings. So do these questions last. Paragraph headings questions are difficult, especially because the answers will not be in the order in the text. And for most other types of question, the answers will be in the order of the text. So this is section 2 of the test. And I'm often recommend the students do this last. And when you do it, start with the shortest paragraphs, because by doing that you can, in theory, eliminate the headings faster. And then number 3, look for similar words. So as with most types of IELTS reading question, you should be able to find words in the paragraph that are similar to words in the heading. And finally, move on if you are spending too much time. And quite often I find that students take far too long in doing this part of the test. You really do have to be aware of how much time you're taking. Here are 9 different ways you can use practice reading tests. So you can do a full 1-hour test to see what score you get. Do a full test with no time limit. Do just 1 reading passage in 20 minutes. Do 1 reading passage with no time limit. Work on a particular type of question. So, for example, if you're having problems with true, false, not given, focus on those. Do tests with the help of the dictionaries and see if it helps you. Simply read in a full passage and see what you understand. Don't do the questions. Get the answers from the back of the book and try to prove why they are correct. Make vocabulary lists and keyword tables. And instead of just testing yourself, try to use practice tests in a variety of ways. This will make your study time less boring, and you'll probably learn more. Maybe you can think of other creative ways to use practice tests. And the last one, keyword technique. So what do I mean by keywords? So read the first question on the underlined keywords. These are the words that you think you'll need to search for in the passage. They are the words that communicate the meaning of the question, normally nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Read the passage at normal speed from the beginning. Look out for the keywords from the question or any words which have a similar meaning. So look for synonyms and paraphrasing. Underline the keywords you'll find in the passage. Read the sentences around these keywords carefully. Check back to the question, compare it with relevant part of the passage, then decide on the answer. So, just finally note, the main point of the keyword technique is that you have some specific words to look for in the passage. Remember, locating the answer is just the first step. The second step is reading carefully, making sure you understand what you are reading and comparing with the question. So we're coming to the end. As usual, if you want a copy of the slides, then they are available from GLN. I hope you found today useful, and next week we will be looking at listening, I'll give you some tips and so on how to improve your listening on the test. So thanks for listening today, and hopefully some of it's been useful to you, and I look forward to you joining us next week. So hopefully for the rest of the day, have a good time, and see you next week.
Thank you, Terry. Rất là cảm ơn các bạn đã tham gia buổi học về listening hôm nay cùng với cả thầy Terry là chuyên gia luyện thi IELTS đến từ GLN. Thì hy vọng là có thể gặp các bạn trong buổi học trong tuần tiếp theo, cũng vào khung giờ từ 9 đến khung giờ là 10 đến 11 giờ vào thứ Bảy tuần tới. Và chủ đề ở thứ Bảy tuần tới thầy sẽ chia sẻ các cái tips về IELTS listening nhé. Nếu như mà các bạn có câu hỏi gì hoặc là có thắc mắc gì về các khóa học cũng như là về IELTS thì hoàn toàn có thể gửi email tới GLN bằng email mà ban tổ chức đã confirm với các bạn. Thì thầy cũng sẽ giải đáp cho các bạn sau đó. Về tất cả về slide của buổi học ngày hôm nay thì bọn mình cũng sẽ gửi cho các bạn khi các bạn đăng ký qua link Google, bọn mình đã gửi ở phần inbox ở phía trên thì sẽ được gửi qua email của các bạn nếu mà các bạn có nhu cầu nhận slide của bài học ngày hôm nay. Nếu như mà không có câu hỏi gì nữa thì chúc các bạn có một cuối tuần vui vẻ và hẹn gặp các bạn trong buổi học trong tuần tới cùng với cả chuyên gia Terry. Bye bye Terry.
Bye.